Welcome back to another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Today, my guest is Daniel Falonipe. He is a Nigerian national who moved to the US for the American dream, but then ultimately decided to keep moving on to greener pastures in Mexico, in Latin America, and he's been getting all into learning about flag theory. He's created a YouTube channel where he's sharing what he's learning along the way. And I think he just has a very unique and interesting story, which is why I invited Danielle onto the podcast. How's it going, man?
It's going very well. Thanks for having me, Vance. Excited to share my story with your audience, and I can't wait to share all the goods and inspire someone who might be maybe traveling. I mean, thinking about traveling right now. I think there's something here, something exciting, something unique for everyone who's listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're actually in Nigeria at the moment, right?
Yes, I'm in Nigeria at the moment. Got here about a week ago for a friend's wedding, two weddings actually. We recently had the western version of it, if you will, in Cancun, Mexico, and now we're here in Nigeria to have the traditional wedding. All of my friends have been flying in from the United States, from the UK, and we're just here to make it formal, to get the parents involved, the friends, and everyone who's here who couldn't make it out to Cancun.
Interesting. And I guess probably the best way to get started is to just tell us a little bit more about your background, your story, maybe how and when you moved to the US, and then how you started traveling as a digital nomad.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's so much to unpack here, but I'll try my best to do justice
The
to it.
abridged
So
version.
the every impression I'll try. So 2016 was when I decided to make that move to the United States after applying multiple times for different types of visas. I always knew I wanted to travel. Honestly, since I was a very little boy, I read a book in particular. It was the volume 16 of the Junior World Encyclopedia, gifted to me by my dad when I was, I believe, 9 years old, and this volume was the world maps and atlases. And growing up in a very tiny village in southwest Nigeria, about 3 hours from Lagos, where I am right now, there wasn't so much to see or do, but I just knew very deep down me that traveling was something I wanted, always wanted to do. If you asked me in class what I wanted to become, I didn't have any idea. I didn't want to become a doctor or an engineer, even though that was what everyone typically expects from you. But I just knew I wanted to travel, even though I didn't know there was a word for it. I mean, digital nomad, we call it nowadays. But I started looking at opportunities. I remember there was one event at 14 was when I first applied for the American visa lottery. Even though the age threshold was 18 at the time, I applied at 14 because I just wanted to, get started with it, get that phase of my life over with. But I went to school here. I went to primary school here, secondary school. I went to university here, graduated in 2015. And, just like every young person, there wasn't much opportunity. There still isn't a lot of opportunity for a lot of young people. And, traveling abroad or just, changing homes or changing where I lived at the time was like the only thing that seemed like the right, like the logical choice. And I started looking at opportunities, and there wasn't a lot of it. So I got into nonprofit work. I saw problems around me. Water and sanitation was a big problem that we faced where I grew up, and I started looking at initiatives that could help us at least provide some solutions for young people like myself. Clean water, clean bathrooms in schools and things of that nature. And I came across this organization that I later on, went on to become the Nigerian delegate to the World Youth Parliament for Water. And this was like the biggest opportunity I've ever received in my life at the time. And being a member of the World Department for Water required that I participated in, conferences, in, workshops. And sometimes that meant that we had to travel out of the country. And even though I was representing a credible organization, because we were an affiliate of, the youth of the United Nations at the time, I still was finding it very difficult to secure visas to travel. Being Nigerian Nigerian. We have no,
Mhm.
I mean, the passport was as shitty as anything could be, and that was a big problem. But I had my big break in 2015. When I went on my first international trip to South Korea, and I was there for a couple of weeks on a workshop, and that was all I needed, to have that conviction that traveling the world was something I really wanted to do. For the first time in my life, I was in the same room with young people from over 150 countries, and it was like the most exciting thing, that has ever happened to me at the time. I was in this room with all this exciting young people. I was eating this different foods, and I flew through China. Later on, went back to China, spent some time there as well, and it was the first time that I ever, came any close to someone who was, had a different skin than me, skin color. And it was just so exciting, and that got me thinking, you know what, I really want to do this, more and more. And later on that year, I ended on going on two other trips, I went to Dubai. I was in Qatar for different conferences and events as well, representing the organization, and that pretty much was the start of my travels. Started out as someone who didn't have anything or have the resources to travel, but then I sought out these opportunities, and it later on gave me that advantage, gave me that edge that I needed, to kickstart my dream of traveling the world, which is excitingly what I'm doing right now.
Okay. So you finally got a visa for the States in 2016. You lived there for many years. How
Mhm.
far along did you get? I think I remember reading that you eventually got a green card, or did you become a U.S. citizen?
Yeah, so 2016 was when I finally got a visa through the organization I was working with in DC. We had a project going on there. I moved officially to the US in 2017. That was in March of 2017. And I was living in DC at the time, and everything was going well. I was doing incredible work. I was excited about it, but then we just stopped getting funded, for one reason or another, and it was time to go back because I was on a very strict visa. I couldn't get outside work with it. I couldn't do any other work with it, and it was time to make that decision, to go back home. And that wasn't something that I wanted to do. I mean, now I've got a taste of the United States, and this was everything. I had my brothers living there at the time. I had one of my brothers has been in the U.S. Since the late '80s, and one of my brothers won a visa lottery to the U.S. at the time. And I saw, when they came back home, they had this beautiful, incredible lives, and I wanted that for myself as well. So, I mean, I had to
Okay,
do
your
something.
brother had a visa before you.
Oh yeah, my brother moved to the U.S. in 2003. He won a visa lottery, in fact.
Okay, cool,
So
cool.
yeah, so he had been living there for a long time, way longer than me, about 13 years at the time. So I just didn't want to go back home, quite honestly, and I had to pay a lawyer and try to do what they call adjustment of status. So it took a long time. It took me about 4 years to get my status adjusted from my old visa to now, where I am a resident. I'm a green card holder in the United States. But that was a very tedious process that I honestly don't wish on anyone. The legal process, the money you spend, the anxiety, not knowing if you're gonna get that thing at the end of the day. With Trump coming into office and just messing a lot of things up, it just gives you a lot of anxiety and makes you fear and just wonder every day what the next day was going to be like.
Okay. So you
Yeah.
got the green card, and I guess just as an aside, in order to maintain the green card, don't you have to spend time in the States, or how does that work? Is that important to you to maintain the green card while still traveling as a digital nomad?
Yeah, so in order to maintain that green card as an immigrant, I mean, if you're not a citizen yet, you have to you cannot be outside of the US more than 6 months at a time. So if you have to be outside of the US more than 6 months, you have to get a special document before you exit the US, saying that you're going to be outside of the US, because if you don't do that and you eventually come back, you might be denied entry, because you'll be considered as having abandoned your residency. So
Right.
that's something that I still have to navigate right now. So
So you
sometime in
just keep everything. You just try to keep everything to like less than 3 months or something like that.
Yes, I mean the longest I've been outside the U.S. has been about 5 months, and when I even like when I got back, I mean I still get questioned every time, even when I go outside the U.S. for 2 weeks. I mean I still get questioned every time, and it's
Hmm.
now I'm getting used to it. But as long as I'm not outside the U.S. for more than 6 months, I know I'm good.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
So, where did you live in the States, by the way?
So I lived in Washington D.C. for over a year. Then I had to, move in with my brother in Columbia, Maryland, and I was in Columbia for about three and a half. I mean, almost until when I decided to start traveling. Really.
Got it. So you were in the Mid Atlantic area for most of the time.
So again,
You were in the Mid Atlantic area for most of the time. That D.C.,
yes.
Maryland, Virginia corridor.
Yep. There was Virginia, DC, Maryland. I never, traveled out because I was scared to even take a flight when I hadn't got my green card yet. Because you had this, even though Maryland is considered one of the safe havens, for immigrants. Even if you don't have your regular papers, you can still get a driver's license. You can open a bank account. So I
Hmm.
mean, for a lot of people coming into the U.S., I mean, you don't want to go to a place like I mean, you don't want to go down south, or you don't want to stay in California, Maryland, Texas, because they're really very lenient about those kind of things because they still want you to excel, they still want you to prosper. That's why, I mean, maybe if we want to talk about it, I still talk about the U.S. being one of the greatest countries on earth, regardless of what I think right now, because a lot of people like myself, immigrants, would never have had the kind of opportunities we have today if pathways like that do not exist.
Yeah, I understand. And so let's start talking about, what is it about the states that um, that you don't like, or that made you start looking for greener pastures? Because I think that this is something that a lot of people are going through now. Obviously, a lot of our audience is based in the states, and there are
Right.
things that they don't like about the states, and they're
Hmm.
thinking about making the move. And so when I look at your story, it's very interesting because they're going to be able to point to you, Danielle, and say, "Wow, this guy's from Nigeria. He's on a green card, and if even he says, the states kind of sucks compared to Mexico, then I can do it." You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, so I'm just curious, kind of what your thought process is, and what kind of conclusions you came to.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's not something that I just woke up one day and just decided. You know what? I mean, the U.S. sucks now, even though it hasn't for the last 4 or 5 years. Um, a lot of things really led up to that. A lot of different life events even before I moved to the US. I would say to a lot of people that if my dad were still alive, I probably would not live outside of Nigeria because him and I had such a very special bond, and unfortunately passed away in 2015 after a slight illness. And that was when everything really changed for me. That was, the nudge that I really needed to go seek my own happiness elsewhere. Because a lot of my life and decisions I've made up until that point have been predicated on what would my dad think? Would my dad be happy? And when he passed away, it was a really, it was a rude shock to me. I wasn't expecting it, and everything just turned on its head. And that's when, I mean, moving to the US for me initially was like an escape from everything that wasn't going well in my life, even though it presented an opportunity to have a better life, to make more money, to impact my family, help my mom, my sisters. But ultimately it still came down to, what, I mean, things are really going down, going to shit here. I need to go somewhere. I need to go, start my life elsewhere. And that's exactly what happened. And being the family oriented person that I was and still am, being in the US at first, in the first 6 months, was really tough. Like, it was the toughest thing I've ever done in my life. In fact, I was at the time, I was working as a Postmates, delivery guy, and I didn't have a car, I didn't have a bike, I didn't have anything. I would walk around on my foot. I would do delivery on my foot in DC. I mean, that was really tough. And every penny that I made, which was not a lot, in a week I would probably make about $100, $150. I would send everything back home because I was so eager to start helping out my family, to start helping out my mom. And it just came to a point I was just like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. So it actually started like from the first few months in the US. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I bought a plane ticket, but it came
Hmm.
time to go home, and I just couldn't, muster the courage to show up at the airport, because going home would, I would be a failure if I showed up back home, because all my life, the dream has always been, to travel abroad and, go make my own life and whatnot. Now I'm back home, not having achieved anything. So that wasn't something I wanted to do, but I still bought a plane ticket still, just in case. And after that, everything started. I mean, after a few years, a year or two, those things started looking up again. I started, making my own money, just working all types of jobs, menial jobs, getting paid under the table. I couldn't get any real job, really. I was, working in warehouses, working in, construction sites, and all of these things, just to make some money. So all of those things, all of those experiences, really put a bad taste in my mouth about, my perception of the US before I got there, and what really happened after I got to the US. I wasn't having a good time at all. Like, I would see a lot of my coworkers, go out on weekends, have drinks, and I wouldn't be able to join them. Simply because, one, I didn't have money. I was saving a lot of money, and because, like, I was scared every single time. There was a stretch of time where I didn't have. I mean, the tag on my car had been, had expired for about 8 months, and I eventually got pulled over, and I was slapped, a $2,000 fine, and that wasn't fun at all. And a lot of this, I can go on and on, just narrating a lot of these experiences that, you know, just ended up being that, a whole one experience that just made me realize that, maybe this country is not exactly as, it's been made up to be, in my mind at least. So, I started, when I got my green card, I mean, the first thing I did was to find a job, right? I wanted to get something as fast as possible. So I got this,
Hmm.
sales job, door knocking. And I started doing that, started making some money, but still left a bad taste in my mouth. Like, I don't want to be doing this. Like, I mean, I graduated college back home. I know that I'm not dumb. I'm a smart dude. I'm better than all of this. I mean, this is not to. I mean, I'm not egotistical at all. I'm just saying I just know what I'm capable of doing, and all of that. I'm just like, I am better than this. I know I can do better. But
Hmm.
all the while, I'd been, investing time in, buying courses, trying to learn a digital skill. And online marketing was something that, was really popular at the time, with people, Shopify stores and all those things. And I came across an ad, particularly in 2017. It was a few months after I got to the US, of this guy who was a digital nomad and was living in Thailand at the time. His name is Jubril Agoro. He's also a Nigerian, but born in the US. I
Yeah,
think
passport heavy.
Passport heavy, yes, passport
Yeah,
heavy.
yeah.
I saw his ad, on, Facebook, just chilling on a balcony in Thailand, laptop in his lap. I was just like, damn, I want to do that. Like, how was he able to do that? But I didn't have any money at the time to buy his course, so I just kept following him. It was a big inspiration to me. I later on, reached out to him. I mean, him and I, we talk now. I made sure to tell him, like, bro, like, you are a big inspiration to me. Whatever I'm doing right now was because of that one ad that you ran in 2017. And that changed everything for me, because it really made me look beyond my surroundings, my environment. And, you know, and back to your question, I know I'm going on a tangent here, but there's so much to unpack here, like I said. But, when I started working and I started making some money, all of the experiences that I've had over the last couple of years, started, just unpacking itself in front of my eyes. I see, a lot of, how my brother, for example, whom I lived with for about 3 years, how it would work, go to work Monday through Sunday, and it would work overtime. I mean, the least they ever worked in a day was 12 hours. And it would do that Monday through Sunday. And on holidays like Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve, it was always working. And I remember it would tell me, what, like, yeah, I gotta go to work, man. Like, I get, triple pay if you work certain hours. I get, double pay, triple. I'm like, at the time, I didn't understand what it meant. It was making good money, and I was just, contributing whatever I was. I mean, whatever I could to the rent. And deep down, I didn't like that. I'm like, bro, like, it's Thanksgiving, it's Christmas, but you're working just because you want to get triple pay. Like, that's not, to me, that's not important enough. And it'd been away. I mean, it'd been
Yeah,
in
I
the
agree.
U.S. for about 13 years, and I look at what other people have been able to achieve. I know, like, if I mean, the U.S. is a land of opportunities, like a lot of people say, but you got to go take it. And I realized that people come here, especially immigrants like myself, and all they do for years, for 20, 30, 40 years, they bust their ass every single day. I've seen what this thing does to families, what it does to couples, what it does to immediate families, my immediate families, my brothers who've been, I mean, in the US. They've been there for 30 years, 35 years. My second brother's been there for about 15, 16 years, going to 20 years at this point. And all he ever does is work. All he ever does is try to make money, and it's still never enough. And for me, that's not something I wanted to come to terms with. I just could not accept that that is the way to live. I couldn't accept that, that's all you had to do. Go home, I mean, go away for 20 years, I mean, I've seen people whose parents, passes away within that time period. They can't even make it back home for their parents' funerals. And that to me is really sad. And what really solidified it for me was when I came back for the first time after about 5 years, last year. And I got home, and I'd lost one of my brothers. It was, I mean, he used to work in, traffic, I mean, road safety is what we call them here. They're like special
Okay.
traffic officers. And I mean, I'm very sorry if this might sound a little graphic, but it was ran over, in his line of work, and I wasn't there.
In our
My
because that happened in Nigeria.
That happened in Nigeria, and I'd just spoken with
Gotcha.
him like a month before that happened. I came back, and my little sister, who I, left when she was just, I mean, 2 years before high school graduation, she was now in a final year of college. I came back, and my stepmom, whom I love so much, she's been sick, and she can't even get out of bed. She's gotten so old. My mom had gotten physically older. You could tell she had gotten older. All of my friends, and most of my friends, had gotten married, started having kids. I got back to where I grew up. Everybody had practically moved on. There was nobody that could recognize me or that I recognized there. And I just came to the realization that, whatever it is I'm doing right now, I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want to be away from my family that long. I don't want to miss out on important life events, like missing
Hmm.
out on, I mean, potentially missing out on my sister's, college graduation. My mom, I don't want to not be there. Something, had to, I mean, God forbid something has to go wrong. I don't ever want to, not be there for the people that matters most to me. And this, a lot of people can come to terms with. A lot of people, they can justify that by saying, you know what, I mean, at least I make money. But I was telling myself that, what, I don't care how much money I make. I was working in sales at the time. I made good money. I mean, I was making well over six figures. But I told myself, I don't care if I have to give up, a good amount of what I make in a year, but just to be there for my family alone. And I know that only one thing can allow me to do that, and that's if I have control of my time and control of my finances. And at the time, I was already learning, digital marketing. I knew that if I went full time, if I went ham on, this business, I could make enough money to allow me to have some time freedom and be there for the people that I love, my family, my friends, and, important life events. I don't want to have to miss out on those. And that's
Hmm.
exactly what happened. I know it's not just one thing, but it's a series of events and life, series of life happenings that just led me to that point where I just felt like it's not worth it for me to live in this capitalist society all the time and just keep grinding my ass off for the next 30 years. I don't want that for myself, but I just want to take control of my time, my finances, and just the people I spend time with.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of what you're saying. And when I look at your YouTube, I can see that you've really gotten into the philosophies and a lot of the advanced teachings around being not only a digital nomad, but also internationalizing and having multiple bases and whatnot. And I was
Right.
curious kind of who some of your biggest influences are. And yeah, I guess kind of how everything got kicked off in the direction of internationalization for you.
Right. So I mean, like I said earlier, I'm a green card holder in the United States, right? And the goal for me initially was, to get a U.S. passport. I mean, I would be due for for U.S. citizenship in the next 1.5 years, maybe 2 years max. But then I start looking at the way the U.S. itself is structured. The way of life, the culture, the people there. Just a lot of things happening in recent times, and I kind of had a change of attitude towards uh, you know I kind of had started asking myself, do I really want to be tied or be associated with a country like the United States? Of course, I say it all the time, don't get me wrong. The US as being like, I could say, a lifesaver for me. At least when I moved at the time, I didn't have anything going for me. That was like my last lifeline. Go to the US, make enough money, help my family, help myself in the process. But then as I started living in the US, it started dawning on me that I don't see myself living here full time. I don't want to live the rest of my life in this country. If I have to, if I have to dissociate myself, then I need to find other options. Um, I will hold on to my residency for as long as I have to, because it makes life easier for me. Applying for visas all the time is not something that I wish everyone had to go through, right? But having
Right.
residency alone in the US, just makes things like 10 times easier. And I just want to hold on to that as long as I can. But how long can I hold on to that for? I don't know. So that's when I started getting into the idea of, second residences, second, citizenships, passport, I mean, multiple citizenships, multiple residences,
Hmm.
as an alternative to what I currently have, which I believe is not going to serve me very long. So I started, watching, Nomad Capitalist, Wealthy Expats, a lot of these other guys. Then I started getting active on Twitter as well about 6 months ago, and I came across Jake Nomada, who you had on your podcast a couple episodes ago, and came across yourself as well. Everyone who teaches anything remotely similar to having diversification, second residencies, and that was when I really started getting into it. I mean, my YouTube was just about documenting my travels as a digital nomad, showing the places I am, the foods that I'm eating. And that's not something that interests me, quite honestly. But I know that if you want to do this long term, be a digital nomad, have this lifestyle, in a sustainable way, you need to have more than just a fancy YouTube channel talking about food and women and the best places to party and all of that stuff. I needed to have a long term strategy. I needed to have something that could ultimately give me a lifeline away from the United States and all of its tax systems and political
Hmm.
systems and social cultural norms and all of that stuff. So that's how I really got into that.
Do you remember how you found the My Latin Life Twitter or how you found My Latin Life?
I don't specifically. I think it must have been someone retweeted you or commented on some account that I already follow, and I just of course I was in Mexico City at the time. I just automatically subscribed, and I've been following your account ever since.
That's awesome. So I noticed that Mexico was your first destination. and
Yep.
then you went to Albania and Georgia, and then
Yep.
I think a little bit of Colombia as well. Did you do anything around setting up bases or residencies, bank accounts, etc., in any of these countries?
No, I did not. In fact, I'm still in that process right now. I'm still very new to this entire second residency and multiple residencies and things like that. I'm still pretty new to it. Mexico City was just for me at the time. I bought a one way ticket. And I just asked myself, I want to go somewhere that already has a community of digital nomads where I don't have to go outside of my comfort zone as much because I put up everything I had for sale within the space of 2 weeks, and I just made that decision abruptly, to start traveling because I was like, you know what, if I don't
Mhm.
do that right now, I'm gonna have to pay my rent next month. I'm gonna have to pay my car notes, my insurance, my everything. Now I'm not gonna have a lot of money left. So I was just like, you know what, let me just get rid of everything right now, and I have to be out of the U.S. in the next month. So I started looking at places, Colombia, Albania. I'd seen a few videos about it, but Mexico just felt like the perfect place to start because I knew that there was a possibility that what I may not like this. I just wanted to give myself a wiggle room, some headway there. If I don't like it, Mexico City is close enough to the US. I'm just gonna buy a one way ticket back and just figure something out. So I went to Mexico City. Didn't set up any bank account because I was just trying to figure it out. I still have everything from Nigeria. I have my bank accounts in the US. I have my bank account from. So I was like, you know what? If push comes to shove and I can't go back to the US, I'm just gonna go back to Nigeria and I'm just gonna figure things out. If I end up with no money on the road, I know that I always have a place to fall back on, even if it's not the US, because I didn't have anything to go back to in the US. I already give my car, my apartment, and everything else. So Mexico was just a safe bet for me at the time, and I ended up. My plan was to be there for about 2 weeks. I was there for almost 2 months, which was one of the. I mean, I every every conviction I need at the time I had in Mexico City.
So, what's been your favorite country so far?
Honestly, it's been Albania. I say that to a lot of people and they don't understand. They don't get it. Because do you want me to get into why Albania is? Because I can go all day, but I'm just gonna paraphrase it. Um,
Yeah, go for it.
growing up, growing up in Nigeria, I was pretty much a full blown adult when I moved, and a lot of the things that really made me uncomfortable about the U.S. was the culture, really. How things were so different. Language. When I got my first job, people didn't get me. I don't get all of the cultural references, the movie references. Anything just didn't make sense. Um, but when I go to Albania and I spend time there, I just feel like I'm in a familiar place. Albania is like one of the least visited countries in Europe up until last year because now there's like a huge influx of people, but immediately I landed in Albania, I just felt so much at ease because it's such an imperfect country, still very rough around the edges. And a lot of the things that I witnessed or that I experienced, it just felt like I was back home in Nigeria with a lot more calm to it. Lagos right now, this is like one of the most popular cities in the world. About 22 million people lives here in a city, just about the size of New York. And when I get to Albania, it's a lot less chaotic, but it's a lot imperfect. There's a lot of imperfection about it that makes me feel like I'm back in Lagos, Nigeria, with not so much of the chaos about it. The food, I can relate so much to it. The landscape, the weather. Of course, it gets a little bit colder in the winter time, but the fact that Tirana, for example, is such a walkable city. I love walking. I love just being able to go to a coffee shop and just sit down. The slow way of living. The way people just don't give a crap about things. They just live their lives like nobody really cares. It's a sharp contrast to what I'd been used to over the last 5 or 6 years. So, yeah, if you ask me over and over again, it's always going to be Albania, and there's no surprise I keep going back, to that place over and over again.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, how did you decide to actually start filming and putting together a YouTube channel and really getting out there? You've been doing pretty well. Basically, in 1 year, you've just about cracked 5,000 subscribers,
Right.
4,700. So
Hmm.
you've definitely seen a lot of momentum. And I've seen you've kind of branched out into topics about Estonia e-residency and nomad
Right.
visas and stuff. So you're really
Hmm.
kind of covering a lot of ground. So I was just curious how that developed.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I started. I've had a couple of YouTube channels over the last couple of years, and I just love, being on camera. I love YouTube as a platform. I'm on TikTok as well. Have a couple, about 48,000 followers on there. It grew really quickly, but I just don't feel as much. As much community as I feel when I'm on YouTube, because I feel like long form content is the future. I mean, it is right now, and I think it's going to sustain really well going into the future. So I've had a couple of YouTube channels. I have a another YouTube channel separate from the one, where I talk about entrepreneurship. I talk about what I do with marketing, helping people run ads online. How to navigate the whole aspect of online income, if you will. So I talk about that. So on this channel, I started out just filming my experiences traveling. When I was in Mexico, I made a few videos there. In Albania, I made a few videos there. When I was in Nigeria for the first time in a while, made a few videos there. But I just didn't feel like I was offering enough value to people, because if you want to see what people what Albania is like. There's 1,001 channels that's going to cover that ground. What Mexico's like, there's several channels who does that really well, and I just don't fit into that, into that niche, pretty much. So as I start exploring, trying to solve my own problems as it relates to getting multiple residences, I find it fascinating that a lot of people still are not talking about this. There's only a few YouTube channels out there who really are in that space of educating people about second residencies, diversification, and having options, really, when it comes to where you live, how you live your life. And as I started solving my own problems, I started looking into visas, because I apply for a lot of visas, most of which I don't get approved for, which is really sad. And I see that when I talk about these things, people kind of relate to it. There's a lot of immigrants like myself, people who do not have a strong passport, like myself, who would want to have options, who would want to get rid of that passport, or at least have something that would allow them to more exposure or better exposure to the world. So that was my entire idea. So everything was quite strategic for me, because I knew I wasn't enjoying what I was filming, but I knew that there was a lot more people I could serve and a lot more value I could give in the aspect of, especially ditching the passport that I have right now, or maybe at least having, something as an alternative to my Nigerian passport. So that's why I started, looking into it, and all of what I do on YouTube. My content is always about just documenting my own process. Like the Estonia e-resident, for example, I was just looking into it. I was like, oh, this is not hard, but it's not been talked about enough, because I have friends in Nigeria who have businesses, who run really, impactful companies here in Lagos, Nigeria, really good friends, but are still held back by the fact that, it's a Nigerian company, it's domiciled here, and nobody really trusts them as individuals, only when they see the kind of work that the company does. And I think that that's such an unfair advantage that people in, companies and individuals who are like Americans, EU citizens, Canadians, that they have. So I'm thinking, if my friends can have this access to the EU, running the business from the EU by getting an e-residency in Estonia, for example, a lot of the problems that they face currently, would not be the case. And the same thing applies for for the digital nomad visas that are out there. There's a lot of digital nomad visas coming out right now, and even just one channel cannot cover it all. And a lot of people need to have that information, just knowing that there's in Namibia nomad visa, there's a Portuguese nomad visa, there's a Brazilian nomad visa. Knowing, having information, has been key to everything that I've been able to do over the last couple of years. And I feel like I need to empower people with the same information so that they can go out there and just, maybe change their fortunes just a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And could you see yourself covering more Africa content in the future? Because I think that that would be pretty cool. Um, because I was actually just looking at the territorial tax map today and sort of the map of global taxation systems, and I was reminded that there's quite a few supposedly territorial tax countries in Africa, kind
Mm,
of in South Central Africa. So it's like Botswana, Namibia, I think Zambia,
right.
and a couple in there. And I'm like, that it would be so cool for someone to sort of be the expert on these programs. And if it was well laid out, and there was processes around this, and it was showed to be straightforward enough, I
Hmm.
guarantee some enterprising Americans and other digital nomads would be down to take a flight to Africa and set up a residency there and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's something that I really want to get into, in the next couple of months. I'm really, just researching it myself because, with a lot of African countries, the problem that we have, including, Nigeria, for example, and there's just not a lot of information readily available online, and not a lot of Africans, even within Africa, travel within the continent because it's really expensive to do so. So infrastructurally, it doesn't give a lot of opportunity for someone to just willy nilly just take a flight down to Namibia, for example, because it's just not. It's sad to say, but it's just not worth it for a lot of people, for a lot of Africans. But as I, do my research, as I, grow, bigger in this space, that's something I definitely want to talk about. I mean, I was in Albania alone, and the amount of messages that I've received from African brothers and sisters back home from different places in Africa wanting to know more about all of these things that I talk about. It's mind blowing, and I mean, until you, I mean, you just mentioned it now, but until just now, I haven't really given it a thought, to really serve, that audience because, everything that I do is almost strategic to a point where I'm trying to, of
Hmm.
course, I want to enjoy what I'm doing, but at the same time, I want to position myself in such a way that I enjoy what I do long term. So, I mean, it would be really interesting to get into that, but I mean, I'm just still, in that process where I'm just like, really in the process. I mean, in a state where I'm still coming back home, like gradually, because I haven't really spent a lot of my adult years, on the continent of Africa itself. So it would be really interesting to, to really explore that for sure. That's something I'll be, happy to get into.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool. Um, no one's done it before, so just an option. I can
Right.
understand why you might not want to or whatever, but I think it'd be cool at the same time. And I guess on that sort of train of thought, like, what do you see being the future of your YouTube channel and of your online presence?
Well, I mean, I want to, like I always say, I love to, do well and do good, and you can only like, I mean, the amount of success you have in, I mean, either financially or, in your state of mind is directly proportional to the amount of people that you help. My goal is to, just keep given a lot of value because it's always been about value to me. When I mean, if you take a look at my second YouTube channel, it's all about. I just don't want to put out content for the sake of it. I just don't want to rant and talk about things I'm doing. Nobody's interested in that. Nobody is interested in how much my Airbnb costs. Maybe they are, but if I can do it in a way that really educates and gives value to them, that would be really cool. And that's just the way I look at things. I don't post on my YouTube channel for the sake of posting 3 times a week. I I will post if there's something I feel that is important, and that is the trajectory that I want to go to. I feel like when you put out the right content, the right people or the right audience will find you. The goal is to keep putting out great content. And I recently set a goal for myself, that in the next year I want to at least have grow to at least 50,000 subscribers. And that's a lofty goal, but I really want to I mean, I'm pretty sure that if I make enough good content, people will find it. And regarding the what I aim to do with it, with regards to second residences, globalization, all these things, my goal is to get more people to really learn about this stuff, especially people like myself, immigrants, and
Mhm.
people who feel like they don't have a lot of options. You go abroad, you go to the UK, you move to the US, and that's it. No, that's not it. I have a lot
Yeah,
of
I think
friends
that's a good
who.
point. I think that's a good point to inspire people that you don't just have to stop there.
Right. I have a lot of friends who have the same aspirations as me, but they're just stuck in this, this rat race of, doing the same things all over again. You know, I mean, the same things, the same trajectory that I was on until, I had this epiphany. And I really want people to understand that, the world is really our oyster, as cliche as that sounds. There's so much more you can achieve by just releasing yourself out into the world. And you can still make good money if you have your ducks in a row. I mean, just learn a digital skill. Or maybe if you don't, I mean, if you want to make money, maybe it's not the lifestyle for you. When I was in the US and live in this capitalist society where everybody just does the same thing over and over again, that's fine. But if you have world aspirations and global aspirations, you want to travel, you want to give yourself the chance to really explore what the world really has to offer. My goal is to inspire you to do that in the best and most efficient way possible, by exploring residencies that will not keep you grounded, take all your money, tax you like crazy, and just keep you in this miserable state of mind. So that is my goal.
Yeah, I think a U.S. green card is actually the best way to do it because you get all the benefits of being able to earn U.S. dollars and work there without the citizenship based taxation for life. And I,
Absolutely.
I have a bunch of Canadian friends that have green cards in the States, and we have come to that same conclusion. I guess the only thing for you is you probably need a second passport of some kind, so that could come in the form of Mexico
Right.
or something else.
Right, absolutely. That's my goal right now. I mean, last 2 years. I mean, just over 2 years. I've done some traveling, and I feel like now going into the next years when I really want to lay all of the foundations for having multiple citizenships. I mean, good citizenship, not just any kind of citizenship. So I
Mhm.
mean, being a U.S. citizen, I really recently made a tweet about saying that my goal 5 years ago was to go to the US and just take everything the US can offer me, even if it includes citizenship. But I think right now I'm just gonna stick it out with my green card for as long as I can until I can get a citizenship that really suits me. Then my goal ultimately is to cut all ties whatsoever. Going back to US these days, I just fish. I mean, I honestly feel like fish out of water, and it just doesn't inspire me anymore. As sad as it is to say that, given that it was always my dream to go there, it just doesn't inspire me anymore. But I'm gonna stick it out for as long as I can.
And so, what are you doing to make money online these days?
Oh well, I run an agency, a marketing agency. I, just it's a one. I mean, a two-person agency, myself and one other person who does all of my grunt work when it comes to setting up ads, and I just white label for other agencies in the U.S. Running detailed marketing strategy for their clients and just helping them get great results, helping them make more money. And I give them great results. They pay me money and everybody's happy. So detail marketing is what I do, and that was something that I really got into immediately I moved to the United States. I just knew I wanted to do something along like e-commerce. Shopify dropshipping was really popular at the time,
Hmm.
and I was I was learning, running Facebook ads. Of course, I wasn't profitable at all at the time. I bought a course by Ty Lopez. I just started buying courses here and there. And, 5 years down the line, I realized that, you know what? Oh, shit, I am actually really good at this. So in 2020, I quit my sales job and I went, just went full time with it while still doing some drop shipping on the side. I had, moderate success with drop shipping, but marketing has always been something that I've always been good at, and that's how I make money, and I'm just grateful that I can do that.
That's great. Yeah, that's a lot of what I recommend to people who approach me is to not quit cold turkey. Don't quit your job unless you're already making a little bit of money online.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's of course lots of ways to do it, agencies, drop shipping, million different ways. But I always tell
Right.
people like at least get a trickle going of online income,
Yep.
so that like obviously burning the boats is good too, and
Yep.
doing a clean cut, but I think if you can build something up on the side, as long as you're focused on your goal and okay, like 3 months from now, 6 months from now, whatever, I'm
Yep.
gonna my goal is to go 100% remote, 100% online. I
Yeah.
think that that's a less risky strategy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't recommend like just cutting all ties without having something else going on, because I did once and I had to go back to get a job. I mean I quit too early, and I had to go back and beg for a job when whatever I was doing at the time wasn't working out. My drop shipping stores just got locked out. I mean everything just went to shit within like 48 hours, and I had already invested in inventory, and you never can tell, but you need to have some type of something going on. And it really I mean it's happened to me over and over again, but thank God I had some savings even while I was in Albania. I mean my Walmart dropshipping store was doing really well, and just out of the blue my account got shut out. I'd emptied out my
Mhm.
credit cards, my savings into inventory, which I'd already shipped out, and I was locked out of my Walmart store for about 6 months with all of my money in there. Like I had to borrow money back to the US because I didn't have, anything going on. But I did have one thing. I had a skill, which was my digital marketing skill. At the time, I was just more focused on drop shipping and not more about, more on marketing. And if I didn't have that skill, I would have been toast. I would have been completely toast. So I just went home for the next 1 month. In that space of time, I got about 3 clients, and I was back up to where I was. So yeah, I mean, it's always good to have a strategy, but before you get on the road, before you buy your plane ticket, just make sure you have something going on in the form of a skill, some of like some type of income. The worst thing that can happen to you is running out of money when you're like 5,000 miles away from home and nobody's out there to save you. So yeah, that's what I always tell people. But this is very doable for sure.
Yeah. What are some other epiphanies that you've had as a digital nomad in the past year or two? What are some other aha moments or things that you learned after you took the plunge and got started on digital nomad life?
The biggest one being that nothing ever goes to plan. I don't care how great of a planner you are, think something's gonna go wrong, something's gonna break, and you're gonna fall flat on your back. So be as open-minded as possible. Say yes when you're in doubt, and just have fun. Of course, when you're on the road and you have a business that you run, you might it might get a little bit tricky trying to combine work and you always feeling like you're on vacation. But the whole point of doing this at the end of the day is to just make memories, man. Like just go out there, have as much fun as you possibly can within limit, of course. And just take every day as it comes. Like I always tell people, things are always gonna fix itself, but you just have to be willing to take that risk at first. So the biggest one is like don't plan too much. Just have fun, go with the flow. Sometimes you have to do that to really enjoy this this lifestyle.
And what do you think are some of the benefits of this lifestyle? What is awaiting people if they take the plunge?
Um. Oh my God. So much. The first one being that if you take on this lifestyle, you're never going to return home the same person. It changes you in really profound ways. Your worldview, your opinion on a lot of things are going to change. I don't care how much of a how dogged you are in your opinions. It's going to change you. It's going, I mean, in very good ways, of course. Because you just get out there and you realize that nothing that you were taught, nothing that you ever knew was true. You meet people, you have conversations, and you just learn to let go of a lot of things. You learn to let go of your troubles. You learn to let go of your pains, even the things that you think you cared about. You realize that you don't care as much, and the things that you don't care. I mean, the things that you kind of take for granted, you develop a much greater appreciation for. um, so at the end of the day, you just realize that life is so much more precious, and there's so much more out there that's still to be discovered, so much joy, so much pain to share. I mean, I can get, I don't want to get too philosophical here, but it's going to change you in a lot of ways, is what I can say, and in a lot of good ways for that matter.
And in what ways do you think that your outlook on life and your worldview has been changed by the time that you've spent in Latin America and Eastern Europe?
Oh God. Okay, so I was just still thinking about this today, and I'm thinking about, because I'm a huge soccer fan, and I'm looking at. I mean, I was watching the World Cup. I've been following the games, and just every day I watch a game or two, and I look at the ways that the Western media, for example, tries to shape our opinion on things, especially if you live in the U.S. And media is everything you consume. Your opinion is shaped by what's being said on media. What your neighbors thinking. The yard signs they have there. Are they Democrat? Are they Republican? Are they gay? Are they straight? Are they this or that? And I just realized that, I mean, deep down, I mean, having spent some time in the US, I lost a lot of what I consider to be my core values in the name of, trying to conform to the society or to the culture that I'm in. Because at the end of the day, I realized that I'm still a stranger in this country, no matter how much they try to propagate the idea of, like, America is the land of the free, is this one and that, like land of immigrants and this and that. I'm still a stranger here. And as as I mean, the more I step outside of the borders, the more I come to terms with who I am as a person. Some of my core ideologies, about religion, about culture, about the things that I believe in, about masculinity, about so many things. I was kind of losing myself a little bit, or let me say I lost myself a lot. And being back in familiar territory, in cultures that I'm familiar with, being, I mean, having spent a lot of time at home in the last 1 year, I'm kind of finding myself again. My core beliefs are starting to I'm starting to settle in my core beliefs, in my opinions, and just getting rid of a lot of the bullshit and the you know the things that I've been programmed with over the last 5 or 6 years, that I didn't realize really that have changed about me. So I think that's the biggest ways to which I've changed. I believe the world needs more strong men. I believe in having a higher faith, and these are things that I've always believed in, things that I grew up knowing, and now I'm starting to find those things again. And living in a country like the United States just tries to make you think otherwise, make you think you're the fool and you don't really know what you're doing. Whereas everyone needs to be grounded in their beliefs, and I think that's the biggest thing that's happened to me over the last 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you think about Latin America versus Eastern Europe? How would you describe the differences between the two regions for people that haven't done both?
I don't think there's a lot of difference there. Maybe in, of course, obviously the weather's kind of different. It's, yeah, it's nice all year round in Latin America, at least in some regions there. In Eastern Europe, a lot of things are very similar to Latin America. The way the for example, I mean, there's so many examples, but for family is one thing that they value so much. Family relationships, the way people, I mean, people's outlook on life. So much different. I mean, you will find that there's a relaxed way of life in Latin America, and the same with Eastern Europe, the Balkans, and that's something that I enjoy so much. So I would say if you've had a good time in Latin America, you're gonna have a good time in Eastern Europe and the Balkans as well. Of course, there's some differences in, like, for example, in Albania, I tell people, if you're a person of color like myself, you're black. I mean, you can expect to have a lot of cultural shock. People are going to look at you differently. Some of them will straight up just not like you simply because you're black, and the only knowledge of black people that they have, is people living in poverty. Think if you're a black person and you're in Albania, you're probably looking for a job, or you're seeking a better life, but it's not the same. Um, as a young person like myself, if you're still of dating age, you're gonna have a lot of success in Latin America, not because you're coming from the U.S. and Canada and you feel like you make more money than them, but just because the way it's set up, the women there and not, they're not full of crap as the women in North America. I'm so sorry to say. um I've had more success than in Latin America, like having meaningful relationships, not just like messing around all these things, but just having meaningful relationships with females, and just having a good time in general if it comes to that, in Latin America and in Eastern Europe. So these are ways through which these countries are similar, and you just find that your life is so much more simpler. You wake up in the morning, there's no rush to get to your stupid 9 to 5. Sorry for my language. And it's just a much more calmer way of life in this regions. I think there's so many similarities.
Yeah, it leads me to a question, which is, what have been your observations dating in the U.S.? I don't want to throw you under the bus. I don't want you to say anything that we have to edit out later. But
No.
I think it would be interesting to hear a foreigner's perspective on dating in the U.S., because I think you'll be able to point out things that Americans don't necessarily understand about their own culture.
Oh, absolutely. At least for me, I mean, again, I'm not saying this to brag. I know him. I mean, I'm a decent looking guy, like, I I still feel like I've got some game. But when I look at dating in the U.S. in general, man, I think it's a total mess, in so many ways, even for people with good intentions, people who make money. Like, you make good money, that's a big prerequisite to having success dating the United States. But even then, you realize that it's just super hard to to approach women. It's super hard to get the type of response that might
Mhm.
suit you. um but I just realized that being outside of the country, like especially being back home in a place like Nigeria, for example, in Albania, in South America, in Eastern Europe, it's either you date success. I mean, relationships with the female counterpart. It's either you're successful or you're not. It's just there's no in between. You either date successfully or you don't. And if you don't, it's not because it's not because you need to learn quote unquote more game. It's just because you just haven't found that one who's gonna be really into you. For me, I was back in the U.S. like a couple of weeks ago. I just left like last week, and I was just thrown into that dating world again, and I mean, immediately just knew like this is not for me. It's, I mean, you have to go outside of your comfort zone to, to meet up with people, to, you spend on dates, but still you're not getting anywhere. And for example, I was talking to a girl, and as the moment I mentioned that, I mean, I don't drive. I mean, I don't have a car because I don't live here. I mean, I don't have a need for a car. I mean, every conversation just melted. Like it just ended right then and there because. It's such a materialistic society. They believe that if you don't have certain things, you're not worthy enough, and that's just not the case. Like elsewhere, people don't care about how many cars you've got or how much you have in your bank account. Are you a good person? Do you have what it takes to to lead a woman in a relationship? So these are the things I feel are so different from the US, and it's so very stressful dating the US compared to other places, if I have to put it in one sentence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, continue with this train of thought. It's funny. What else?
Okay, let's see. Well, um as a person of color, for example, I, especially for an immigrant, it's not the most fun. For example, I mean, because I mean, this is a personal experience. I just can't relate to a lot of things. Like there's a lot of cultural difference, I mean, between the United States and everywhere else. And if you don't understand the nuances of culture, of language, of pop culture, it's just going to be really difficult. A lot of people think that, for example, because I mean, I speak English, fluently, that I must know something about the U.S. culture. I mean, I don't. I didn't speak fluent English until I was 12 or 13, and I've come a long way just to be able to fit in. But being an immigrant in the US, it's just really tough because one, people don't understand the cultural differences play a huge factor in whether or not you have a successful relationship or successful, I mean, or you go on successful dates or not. So that's a big difference there. But when you go elsewhere, for example, that's something that in Latin America, for example, I've heard people, just want to talk to me or just want to be closer to me just because I have a slight accent, or because I know some things about the African culture or the African entertainment scene or the African music that they don't. And in some ways it makes you feel good about yourself. It makes you just want to go out there and just have fun and just interact with more people. So merely stepping out of the US, it's a lot more fun. Honestly, if you're listening to this and you're thinking maybe or not whether or not you should go, it's a lot more fun. Like I'm not saying that you have to sleep around or this. Well, heck, if you want to, well, it's up to you. But it's just a lot more fun because a lot of the things that people take for granted in the US, everywhere else, you're gonna be a baller. You're gonna be balling hard because of those things. So just step out and see how much more fun dating can be outside of the US, man.
I tend to agree. It's certainly more fun.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the car thing is actually huge because I'm also someone that I've never owned a car in my life. And I was able to get away with it when I was younger because I grew up
Mm,
in a big city on a subway line. But I
right.
knew at some point, if I was going to continue living in North America, I would need to get a car
Absolutely.
because our North America is just designed for cars. And
Yep.
um, there's a lot of downsides to it, but which we can come back to. But I think just living in walkable cities makes such a huge
Hmm.
difference in terms of your health, your mood, your ability to be social, and it's
Absolutely.
just overall a better lifestyle to live in walkable
Yep.
cities.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, I 100% agree. And to further buttress that point, when I go back to the US, for example, I mean, before I moved, I had two cars, right? I got a car because I needed to drive to work, obviously. Then I got another car because I thought my mom would be visiting me very soon. And if I'm not around, I needed to be able to drive around. But then I needed to start, traveling. And I was like, oh shit, I mean, what do I do? And one way or the other, I had to get rid of both cars. And when I moved, say I went to Mexico, for example, and I realized that, you know what, I don't need a car. Like if a city is designed in this way, if all cities were designed in this way, one would never have a need for a car. And when I lived there for a couple of weeks, I mean, I just realized that I am much more healthier. My outlook on life is different. I mean, I can just pick up and go without having to worry about, being stuck in traffic and all of these things. And the same thing happened. I mean, in Eastern Europe, I do an average of 7 to 10,000 steps a day without even trying, you know. And when I'm back in the U.S., I'm probably getting like 10 pounds in 2 3 weeks, and when I'm outside of the U.S., I'm losing 10 pounds like in a few days simply by just
Hmm.
walking around and just finding my way on my foot. And that's just something that I enjoy so much, and I just don't understand when I'm back in the U.S. and I'm not exactly in the city. It just makes me really uncomfortable, and I just never want to go back again, honestly, if I can, simply because I don't ever want to drive. If I can make it happen. But
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that
And
it's
I
that
don't mind
way.
renting cars. Like I just rented a car last weekend, did some cool
Right.
adventures. I can drive. To anyone listening, I'm a cool, competent guy. But owning
Yeah,
a car is very different. And I think especially when you're early in your career, it takes such a significant portion of your budget that it makes it
absolutely.
more difficult to save because
Right.
that car is probably cost about $1,000, $1,500 a month when you include
Yep.
all the insurance costs, um, the maintenance, etc.,
Absolutely.
gas, of course. And if you can add an extra $1,000 to $1,500 to your bottom line, that's going to significantly increase your monthly savings rate. It's going to
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
going to accelerate your path to financial independence, and it's going to make it easier to travel and become a digital nomad. Because I've traveled with I've invited a bunch of buddies to come down and spend time in Mexico, and
Hmm.
they'll do like a month or two with me, and they're having the time of their life. And they're having literally the time of their life, but then they go, yeah, the thing is, like, I'm paying $1,000 for a car back home that I'm not even using. I
Oh,
just want to go home and be with my car. And I'm like, Jesus
I,
Christ, bro.
I don't. I really don't understand it. And I mean, in my first few months traveling, that was me, because I only got rid of one car, and I still had the other one just sitting in my driveway. And I was like, you know what? If I ever have to come back to the US, I don't want to not have a car or not be able to drive around. And just because I had this, it's almost like I had my identity, or my ego was tied to having that car because it was a fast car, Kia GT, and I love this car, and I didn't just want to get rid of it. But I was in Albania, and I was running out of money, and I still had to churn out about $600 in car note and insurance a month. I'm like, this makes no sense. It makes no sense. So immediately I got back to the US, I had to get rid of it. And I did. And I could immediately feel the relief. It just went straight into my spines, and I just felt good afterwards. Like that's $600 more money that goes into my pocket that I don't have to worry about, car notes, insurance. I
Mhm.
can just, spend on anything I want, plane tickets, so pretty much anything. I mean, a nicer Airbnb. So like, I've met people like that. They come back to, we come back, down to South America, and they're like, you know what? Like, I still have my apartment, and I'm like, how much are you paying, bro? Like, oh, I'm paying like 3,000, $4,000 in the Bay Area. I'm like, dude, you need to get rid of that shit ASAP. Like, you don't need that in your life. I mean, you've been down here a couple months. Why are you still paying 4 grand? In the Bay Area? Well, if I go back, you're not going back. Like, look at your life in the last couple of months. How different has it been? Come on now. We both know, like, you like this. So it's like, for a lot of people, it's like an ego thing. They're so afraid to I mean, how they're gonna look, to people. And quite honestly, I felt a little bit like that too. When I came back to the US, and after my first, round of travels, and I was having to crash on a friend's couch, and I was there for about 2 weeks. And honestly, towards the end of my stay, it was starting to get really uncomfortable for me because, like, of course, he's my friend. He's not gonna tell me to, like, to get out or anything. But I'm like, what is he gonna think? Like, I had a crib of my own. He used to come over. We have a good
Hmm.
time, on the balcony. I'm like, I don't know how he's gonna feel about this. And it's not about him, it's about me feeling some type of way. That is my ego speaking. I later, came to that conclusion. That is my ego. That is my identity that I felt was tied to me having all of these things. But deep down, as soon as I stepped out of his apartment and I'm back on the road, I felt good again because nobody knew exactly what I was doing. Nobody knew where I slept. So I think for a lot of people, you just have to get rid of that. I mean, it's hard, granted, but you just have to understand that nobody really cares. And when you speak with people, they silently wish that they can do what you're doing right now. They silently wish they can travel the same way you do. They
It's
silently wish
true.
they don't have all this baggage hanging around their necks. And we just have to understand that and realize that it's actually a blessing to not have those things hanging around our necks.
I 100% agree. What other recommendations would you have for people who um, are looking to just set things up correctly before they head down to Mexico, before they head down to Latin America? What are some ways that they can set up their affairs in the United States? Things they can buy or plan or money saving
Mm.
things, etc.
Great question. I mean, first of all, you need to get your finances in order. You cannot step out there without having at least, I would say, 3 months of, like, financial runway, because a
Hmm.
lot of things can go wrong, and you don't want that. So have some type of savings first and foremost. Then you need to have some type of income. In a way, either you retain your 9 to 5 job. If you have a 9 to 5 job that allows you to work remotely, I mean, it's not a bad idea to stick with it, at least until you can get something, that you really enjoy. Even if you don't enjoy it, just hold on to it. Just hold on to it. um then on the side, I mean, to truly live this life, I mean, a lot of people have been able to, pull it off by having a, regular W-2 jobs that allows them to work remotely. But still, the I would say the holy grail of this enjoy of this lifestyle is to be able to work and have, be in charge of your finances, let have everything be, on your own terms, in terms of, like, your time, your finances. On the side, I would say you can try to learn something digital. There's a lot of resources out there. Just find something that really interests you, something that fits your lifestyle. It could be what you've been doing right now. I mean, if you travel to South America and you have that much savings, if you have 3 months savings, for the
What do
US
you think
standard
would
of
be
living
adequate for 3 months savings?
in South America, honestly, like, depending on where you go. I mean, if you go to Mexico City, I would say you should probably budget about 1,500 at the very least a month. But you're going to be really struggling even on that because things are really changing fast now. But if you go to a place like Medellin, if you're living on $2,000 a month, you should be pretty good. For 3 months, I would say that's about $6,000. And if you want to, be there for 12 months, I mean, you have an equivalent of, that much time. So I would say on average, anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 should put you on in a comfortable place if you're trying to, live in South America, even in Eastern Europe. I mean, a lot of these countries. I
Hmm.
mean, Lagos right now, Albania. I mean, Lagos is more expensive than Tirana, Albania. And in Tirana, Albania, you have a much more higher standard of living in Albania. I mean, the roads are better, the electricity is much better, internet is like 100 times faster, in Tirana. So in Tirana, for example, in Albania, you can get by with $1,000 a month. So if you have enough money for 3 months living in the US, you can go 6 months elsewhere. And that's enough time to really devote to learning something, to learning a skill, to bootstrapping a business, or to just find something that's going to make you some money on the side. I still do recommend getting on sites like Upwork a lot, because that's how I kickstarted my freelance business. And Upwork was really big for me. Of course, I already had a skill, but if you do it right, I have a lot of videos on my second YouTube channel. I wrote an ebook in the past where I talk about getting your first client and scaling your business using a platform like Upwork. If you have a skill that you can offer on there, there's several avenues to do it, but just make sure
Mhm.
you have money coming in. You have a financial runway that is sufficient for the place that you'll be living in, whether that's South America or in, Southeast Asia or in Eastern Europe, and just go to work. The first few months is really for you getting the hang of things. There's so much time to have fun, to enjoy, but don't make the mistake of just partying all day every day. Of course, have some set some time aside, but get to work, because this life is only enjoyable if you have the resources to live it.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Mm,
Um, Definitely very good words of advice.
yep.
Um, any other topics or things that you think would be important to mention?
Um, I probably mentioned this before, but like as you travel, just keep an open mind. You're gonna run into issues. Things are not always gonna go right, but like be really sure if this is something you want to do. I've seen a lot of people start on this nomad lifestyle, and they quit a few months in. And I've seen a lot of people go broke, like
Really?
terribly broke. Oh,
Surprised.
Jesus Christ. I've met people go terribly broke on the road. And for example, I used to know someone who, all of the identity is hinged on the idea of being a digital nomad, and this make content online, and they do all this really influencer-ish stuff that people do. And you just realize that you can't access the social media. They just vanished off the face of earth. And that's, it could only be one thing. And I'm pretty sure it was, because we had a conversation. They just ran out of money, they can't sustain the lifestyle, and they had to go back home. That's not a position you want to be in. Plan, and network with people. Get on Twitter if you're not on Twitter. There's a
I
lot
would
of
say that
really.
the ideal scenario is that your cost of living is going to go down, and so you'll
Yes,
basically keep making the same amount of money, but your cost of living is going to like drop dramatically.
absolutely. Like, I spend, like, sometimes when I do my calculations at the end of the month, I'm in awe of how much I'm able to get by on. Not because I want to be frugal, it's just because, well, things are just the way it is. They're not as expensive as they are in the US. In Albania, I'm getting by with $1,000 a month, living in a penthouse, a beachfront house in Duras or in Vlora, and I'm living the good life. I'm eating out every day. I'm having a few glasses of beer every day, and things are just. I'm just living the good life on $1,000 a month. So that's something to really consider. Definitely one of the upsides of living this lifestyle for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
Dude, this has been a really interesting episode, and having the chance to hear the experience of an immigrant to the United States that
Yep.
became a digital nomad and has been
Absolutely.
exploring not only Latin America, Mexico, and Colombia, but then also Eastern Europe as well. You're
Yep.
even working from home in Nigeria, which I think is one of the best benefits of digital nomadism or
Absolutely.
working remote is that we can actually spend even more time with our family than before.
Absolutely. I'm with my family right now. Like, I just spent the last couple of days with my mom, my sister. They excuse me if I need to get on work calls, and it's just everything that I've always dreamed that it would be. At least on the relationship side of things. Nothing could give me the same opportunity that being a digital nomad has been able to give me. Of course, it's not always going to be like a bed of roses. There's going to be days where some things just suck, like I mean, the other day my internet was crap and I was almost tearing my hair out. But there's gonna be days like that. But if you look at it, if you zoom out, it's a dream.
What has been the thing that you've been most proud of on your journey so far?
The fact that this lifestyle that I'm living now, I I would always dream about living it, even when I was working on the production line in a warehouse in Baltimore, Maryland. I remember because I also have a podcast. Shameless plug here. It's called Inspired by Freedom, and one of the reasons why I started that podcast was because I gained um, so much inspiration from listening to podcasts like this. A major one is Zero to Travel podcast by Jason Moore, and the That Remote Life by by
Miko?
Miko. Yes. And I would just plug in my headphones all day, even though we're not allowed to, because it's a production line, things can go wrong. I would put in my earphones, I would throw my hoodie on, nobody knew what's going on down there, and I would just listen to people just like telling the travel stories, and I would just dream about it all day. Like someday I'm gonna be a digital nomad, I'm gonna travel, and I'm gonna be able to work while doing it. I'm gonna do it on my own terms. So my biggest, I would say, pride has been that fast forward a few years, that's happening. And, you know, I mean, I believe in luck, but I don't think it's luck at all. I don't think this is a coincidence. It's all just like believing and just putting in like pure hard work and just
Yeah.
making sure
You
that
had a goal and you
it
worked
works
towards
for
it.
me. Absolutely, because I mean the beginnings were very rough. Like, I mean, I would be in Mexico, I would be doing outreach every day, cold emails, and just trying to get clients, just so I can sustain that lifestyle. Because it would be a disaster if I have to go back to the U.S. and not have a place to live. So it requires some level of work on your side if you want to sustain this long term. But it's definitely achievable for most people, if not all.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. This was really inspiring to hear about your story.
Absolutely.
So, Danielle, go ahead and do the shameless plugs and tell people where they can reach you and anything that you want to share with the audience and promote.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm very active on, if you want to reach out to me personally, I'm always like in my DMs. I respond to my DMs. If Daniel did on Instagram, check out my YouTube channel as well. If Daniel did on YouTube, TikTok, if Daniel did everywhere. I mean, just type in if Daniel did, it's going to pull out all my socials. If you type that into Google. So, whatever it is that suits you, whether you want to consume my YouTube content, you want to come on the podcast called Inspired by Freedom Podcast, you want to take a listen, go do that as well. And if you just want to connect with me, see, what I'm up to in Nigeria, drinking a glass of palm wine, just eating bushmeat and all of this, really cool things that we do here in Nigeria, you can find me on Instagram.
Awesome, man. Thank you again. This has been another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Cheers.
Cheers, man. Thank you for having me.